Why don't you explain, Dave, what Reimagine RTD is all about? What is it in a nutshell?
Well, Doug, Reimagine RTD is an opportunity for us to take some intentional time to look ahead, to look forward, and really try to determine what is going to be the future of transportation and mobility for the Denver metropolitan region. So about, almost 2 years ago now, in January of 2018, I said, to my senior leadership team, I said, we are on the verge of transportation transformation in our industry. There are so many new technologies coming at us, so many different needs and demands of the way that people want to travel. We're being asked questions about the relevancy of public transit in terms of what does this future of transportation look like. So we started in January of 2018 being very intentional about talking about transportation transformation. And so starting with my senior leadership team, we dedicated an hour every week to the topic of transportation transformation and how we were going to be intentional about thinking and discussing these things that are impacting our industry today and for the future. And really it's an innovation lab, if you will, for our senior leadership to just spend some focused time every week thinking about the future. And we include topics like autonomous vehicles, electrification, transportation network companies, micromobility, microtransit, all the kinds of things we're seeing now and possibly things that might impact us in the future. So as we embarked on those discussions and I started using that vision and that vernacular of transportation transformation, or T2 for short, I started using that with our board of directors a bit. And then in March of 2018, we do a senior leadership board retreat every March to establish the board's strategic priorities for the upcoming year. So in March of 2018, the board did pick a strategic priority of addressing future transportation needs and methods, which really just aligned perfectly with some of my vision around this transportation transformation. So we started out really embarking on, we really need to do a comprehensive operation analysis and also a system optimization. And that's where our conversations kind of started. And some of this is driven by the availability of labor that we're struggling with in terms of resources to deliver our services every day. Is like, are we actually sized appropriately for what we can really do? But then soon this vision kind of took off and got very broad and very much beyond just doing a network redesign or looking at the system. So for Reimagine RTD, it's going to be about a 1.5 to 2 year process. We selected a consultant firm to lead us through this, and we've just got the process underway and we've launched. But basically, Reimagine RTD is how we've named this or how we've branded this to be able to look at what's going to be the future of RTD. We're going to look at not only what we do in terms of our networks, in terms of doing some possible network redesign, but we want to identify the gaps that are out there, and then we want to be able to fill those gaps. And it doesn't mean that RTD necessarily has to provide all the services, but we do in taking along a similar vision with APTA. I do believe that as the regional transportation provider, we need to be the regional mobility integrator for our area. So that's kind of how Reimagine RTD got birthed and where we stand today and how we're kicking it off.
It sounds really very exciting. Would you say a little more about how you structured this initiative? I assume it's a formally established project, right? And what is the structure around it?
Yeah. Yes, it is a formally established project, and because we had a strategic priority or a strategic goal of the board's that came out of the 2018 retreat that we carried into 2019, we actually were able to put some funding behind this initiative, and we put around, I want to say it's about $4.7 billion, or million, excuse me, $4.7 million.
$1 billion, that's a big commitment.
Getting my projects confused here. So $4.7 million to set aside that for the budget. We developed our scope of work and, of course, put all of our requirements in there for the consultant team that we were going to select. We talked to the board frequently about what we're planning on doing with the overall project, and a really key part of this is going to be an incredibly robust public engagement and stakeholder engagement process, because we realize that as we move through this, a few things. We need to hear from the public we serve and our stakeholders and our electeds and our customers on what do they see as their needs and their demands. What do they see as areas where we can improve or do things differently? And of course, thinking down the road a year and a half or 2 years, and as many agencies, or at least a handful of agencies that have gone through some network redesign, some of the decisions aren't often popular, but they're necessary. And so the idea behind all this public engagement and stakeholder engagement is to bring people along with us. And so at the end of the day, if there's some things maybe that people don't like in the decision-making process, at least hopefully they'll understand the why we had to make the decisions we did and why we're doing what we're doing.
Now,
so there'll be,
excuse me, Dave. Before we get a little more deeply into stakeholder involvement, which I'd like to explore with you in some detail, let's go back to the board. Now, you've indicated that your board is really very supportive of this project. What have you done to turn them into owners, real owners of this? How did you engage board members to ensure that they felt this was really their project, not just a staff initiative?
Right. I think a couple of things in that regard, Doug, as far as being able to align this work with a board-adopted strategic goal or strategic priority for 2019 was the first big step. That gets the alignment between, some of the vision that we were seeing as the staff team and then the vision that the board was seeing around need and demand. So that was the initial alignment that occurred. And then it's just been a lot of, since then, we've been talking a lot about the process to the board. So one thing we've made very clear is that this will be a board-driven process. They own it 100%. They're in charge of it 100%. We will educate and inform and advise the board, but they will be the ones making the decision. So and I think also that public engagement, the robust public and stakeholder engagement is important to them. But also at the same time, they want to know that they're kind of leading the destiny of this organization as well. But
so they're the final decision makers, the direction setters.
That's correct.
In this project.
Correct.
Now, yes, sorry.
Well, there's a little bit of other structure involved. So we've also just reached out to a number of stakeholders, inviting them to participate on a couple significant committees. So we have the RTD Board of Directors. Then we have we're going to have a steering or advisory committee that will inform and report to the RTD staff. And so that's going to be the highest level advisory group that will have broad-based representation across the entire RTD district, including elected officials. It'll be diverse in terms of inclusivity and in terms of demographics and, of course, socioeconomic and race. And then we're going to have so we're actually reaching out to people. We have a process. We've invited people to apply for those roles. And then we have also a technical working group, which won't be it's exactly that. It's going to be technical in nature, so it will be working at a little bit of a different level. And so we've reached out to groups and asked for applications for those groups. So those groups will meet a couple times. They'll meet about every 2 months. And then their inputs will come into the RTD staff. And this will be an iterative process over time, so that as every 2 months, we will also do an update to the Board of Directors to give them the information that we're receiving as staff, what's going on at the technical working group, what's going on at the steering or advisory committee level, keep the board apprised every step of the way, get the board's feedback. It's going to be a very dynamic and fluid process. And then there's going to be a big variety of other ways that people can engage in terms of other focus groups and things like that.
Would you give some examples, Dave, of stakeholders who have already accepted invitations? Just run over the list of major stakeholders.
Yeah, so we're in this process now, and so one of the things we wanted was to get representation from our elected officials. So in the Denver metro area, our metropolitan planning organization, their regional transportation improvement program is set up in 7 counties. And so what we said is we reached out to each one of those organizers for each regional, each county, and said we want, one elected official from each one of the regional TIP folks to be represented. So we have elected officials. We have our Denver Regional Council of Governments, who is our MPO. We've asked them for a representative. We've asked our Colorado Department of Transportation for a high-level representative. We've reached out to our transit management agencies and transit management organizations. We have about a half a dozen of those throughout our area. We have a couple of committees that serve RTD and disabled roles and ADA, so we're going to have a couple of representatives from those. We've reached out to about 12 of our major chambers of commerce because we think it's very important that private sector is represented and those kinds of things. We've reached out to community-based organizations. So we also believe it's important for everyone to have a voice. So, and rather than have individuals do that, we like to have people that represent certain organizations that can speak on behalf of various community needs. So,
what kind of response are you getting to the invitations?
Well, we're getting a number in. The request just went out last week, so it's a little bit early. It's a little bit early yet, but I can tell you everywhere where we go and we talk about Reimagine RTD, almost everyone says, well, I want to be involved. I want to be on that committee. So I don't think we're going to have any shortage of people that want to be engaged. The challenge we may have is keeping it at a manageable size, and we think that manageable size for the steering committee is about 30 people, no more than 30 people. Plus, it's a huge commitment for them. It's we're asking for probably a few hours a month, from these folks, and in some cases, it could be more as they have materials that they need to study and prepare and review before they come to a meeting, or maybe after a meeting. So we also have some other folks around like university and higher ed, and then of course bicycle, pedestrian, environmental groups. Things like that. And we've even reached out to the AARP for somebody to be represented there as well. Good.
So you're really reaching out very widely, and the response has been good, right?
Yes. So far the response has been good. We've briefed the board on the selection process, and they've given us quite a bit of input on if they think that, we have some gaps. They've made some suggestions for some additional groups for us to reach out to. So we'll listen to them on that. So about the middle of the month of September, we are hoping to have our steering committee and then also our technical working group. We're hoping to have those committees selected. And then, of course, we'll bring them back to the board, not for approval necessarily, but we'll just say, we've went through the process as we've talked about with you, board. Here's who we've selected, and then they might have some suggestions for, tweaking here or there. So that's what the process looks like loosely for those two top-level committees.
Would you describe, and you may have covered some of this, but as a closing question, describe some very concrete products you see coming out of this very exciting initiative. You've got well-designed structure, you've got a budget. It's obviously going to be a major innovation undertaking. But what kinds of very concrete products do you see emerging from this?
Well, there'll be a number, Doug, and a couple of them I think that the industry can really relate to. The first major product, which will be about towards the end of 2020, will be what are we going to do about network redesign if we're going to do anything at all. So that would be a comprehensive operational assessment or analysis and system optimization plan is a deliverable for towards the end of next year. And so that will be something, that will take months of work and then also months of iterative process with the board. And, they're, as I said, they're bought in, but, we're all bought into it, but then there's also a little bit of caution, that we all have because it's like, okay, we're going to take a really big look under the hood and, we've got to be all in on this. So, we've already done a lot of thought-provoking things with the board around that. But that's one tangible, one deliverable. Another big deliverable will be at the end of our 2-year process. We're asking for what we're calling the mobility plan of the future for the Denver metropolitan region. And really, we're not calling it a strategic plan or those kinds of verbiage, but it's really, this is an opportunity for RTD to look at what's the next, because we haven't really done strategic assessment since way back in the late 1990s and early 2000s that led to the passage of our Fast Tracks program, which was about a $5.6 billion transit infrastructure build-out. So we've been all about that program for the last dozen years or so. And so now we're at that, stage where we need to be looking at the what's next. So that's what I tell people is going to be the big tangible deliverable at the end, is it's going to be, hey, what's next for the future of transportation in the Denver metro area? And, a plan with real options. And it might even have, some funding requests around it as well. Because one thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a constrained financial plan, but we're also going to do a plan that's unconstrained. And I think that's a huge benefit because we haven't done that here. So we always talk about in terms of what we can do in terms of our current budget. We don't ever look at here's what we could do, or let me phrase that a different way, really. What we want is an unconstrained plan based on what are the actual needs and demands, and then what's it going to take to deliver it.
Well, very ambitious and very exciting. Now, what, to your mind, down the pike away, what outcomes or impacts do you envision that would really make Reimagine RTD a worthwhile investment? What's your vision for the impacts on the region that are going to emerge from this?
I would say number one, Doug, is what I really want to see out of this, what would really mean success for us, is that at the end of the day, that the lion's share of our stakeholders and our public would say, this is a plan that is going to help me, it's going to serve me, and when I say me, not just me individually, it's going to help, well, maybe it's going to help me in terms of, my commute or my transportation or my options, but it's going to help our community, it's going to help our region, it's going to help solve some of these transportation problems that we're all talking about. And that we're all talking about rather locally, by the way, because as I talk to our mayors throughout the Denver metropolitan area and the Metro Mayors Caucus, their two big issues are transportation and affordable housing. And so at the end of the day, if we can move the needle in a big way on the transportation concerns that we're experiencing, and we can come up with a way to concretely deliver them through whatever technical practicality we need, whatever fiscal sustainability we need, including possibly some additional revenue. Because today, I just see that, we can either do what we're doing today, which is pretty much status quo, or we could reach beyond that and really make a difference. And so that'll be my measure of success, is at the end of the day, we're going to come up with a plan that's going to make a difference and that people can see, it's going to be tangible to them that it makes a difference.
Well, it's clear you're one of those chief executives who wears the what I call the chief innovation officer hat. You're making a big commitment to systematic innovation. How much of your time do you see yourself spending on this going forward?
Well,
it's time commitment is it for you as the CEO, for you individually?
Well, I think individually, I'm probably looking at around, I haven't thought about it really in terms of my time percentage, Doug, until you just asked me. So I'm thinking I'm going through my mind here, but I'm going to say, I would say probably 20 to 25% of my time, if not more, is going to be all around Reimagine RTD, because I'm either going to be working on it with team members, or I'm going to be talking about it out there with stakeholders, or engaged directly in some other way. So maybe about a third, really. I just went up. I went from 20 to 25 to about 30.
Yes, you did.
About 30%. Because
and if we keep talking, it'll be 50% if you're not careful.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to give myself some restraints because, as you and I have talked about the role of the CEO, I kind of divided up into 3 buckets. And, a third is kind of running the day-to-day organization, a third with stakeholder relations, and a third with board relations. So I can't overstretch myself too much.
Right, but I think there's pretty wide agreement in both the for-profit as well as the public sector that leading innovation is a preeminent CEO responsibility. I'm sure you agree. And,
oh, absolutely, yes.
Well, sir, this has been fascinating. I want to thank you for taking the time, David, to tell us about this exciting initiative, Reimagine RTD. I think down the pike a bit, we need to do a part 2, don't you? And you tell us how it's going.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to do a part 2.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, and we'll look forward to part 2 down the pike a bit. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Doug.